Okay, thanks, Holger, for inviting me for this ARIVE lecture series. My plan for today is first, I will give an overview of why we do what we do, and then take you through several examples, and then finally, we can open the floor for some questions and discussions. So I'm sure pretty much all of you would agree that we are blessed and overwhelmed with so many powerful technologies around us, from smartphones, from smartphones, from smart uh, bands and headsets, so many of these different things. And one of the challenges with these, although they provide lots of powerful interactions, powerful possibilities, there are certain situations where you wonder how to use some of the functionalities, and sometimes the way to handle these things, way to interact with these things doesn't seem to be in line with what we are naturally good at doing. Our natural behavior and the way we need to operate these technologies sometimes has a mismatch. I can give you a personal example from one of my own experiences. Back in the early 2000, there was this sound, this knocking sound that used to be the Yahoo Messenger sign-in sound. And often people get confused as to look at the door or as to look at the screen with that sound. And although it may sound very simple and something that a user should be easily learn, but your some subconsciousness will always make you wonder when you hear a knocking sound to look at the door, right? So that's a very simple example of where there is a mismatch between technology and what we might naturally do. That's just one example, but there are many such examples I can provide from existing state-of-the-art technologies. What we try to do in our lab is to try and come up with ways to, to bridge this gap. Specifically, we are looking at how can we design new interfaces so that we can harness the full power of, of technology by building the right interface between the man and the machine in a way that the primary principle around that is that the amount of adaptation that the user has to do should be minimal, whereas most of the adaptation should happen from the technology side. One example of our own work that is in line with this vision we have is this particular project. Here the idea is, suppose you have to move a digital media from one device to another. You can't leverage on things that we already know how to do, moving physical things. If it is a physical thing, the tangibility allows us to simply grab and pass it to somebody. Whereas in digital content, since we don't have that tangibility, then we have to fall back into other mechanisms. Could be emailing, could be some form of cloud solution that doesn't correspond with the way we move physical things. So in this project, we try to give some physicality to intangible digital media so that the user can move them around as if they are physical. So here you can see on my screen, I have a phone number. I can grab it as if it's tangible and move it to my phone. And the same principle goes here. One person has a content that needs to pass to the other person's phone. Simply grab and pass it on as if it's something tangible. So the point here is the data transfer happens through cloud, but the point here is the wrapping we did so that the user simply have to rely on the, the intuitive, the natural way of just grabbing and passing on. So that's one example. Another example to further substantiate why we do what we do. If you take your mobile phone and try to operate, it's a very powerful device, but oftentimes the usage requires to dedicate your visual and hand, basically hand-eye coordination to operate the phone. You can try this, on your own time. Try and open an app without looking at the viewfinder. It's very difficult because without looking at the screen, it's hard to know where each of these app icons are. Compared to that, if you think of your own body, you could touch parts of the body without thinking, without putting a lot of effort. If you want to touch forehead, elbow, chin, cheek, just almost while doing something else, without paying much attention, without taking your visual attention away, you could do that. And the point is, we can leverage that ability to do even powerful interactions with the phone. So to do that, one of the projects we tried in the past is trying to think of ear as an interface, because then we can leverage on this proprioception, the ability of recognizing where our body parts are without having to pay attention or without having to look at that. So we ran a user study, asked people to touch different parts of the ear, and we looked at how accurately people could do. So here in second image from the left, the number 3, if there are 3 regions, you could see people get very precise. We can get people to do it very precisely if it is earlobe or top of the ear. Middle of the ear has a less precision. There's a range. So what that means is, if I want to leverage on ear as a user interface to control my phone, if I want to use ear as a 3-button interface, I can do a very tiny button on top, tiny button at the earlobe, but maybe a wider button in the middle to account for the variability among users. And we actually, to prove that, we built this interface we call earput, basically a capacitive sensor around the ear. And now with this, you could operate the phone in a even powerful way. Even right now, as I speak to you, if I get a phone call, I don't have to get my attention or distract my attention and look at my phone and ruin this conversation. Instead, I could be doing this, right? So it offers this eyes-free, uh, less attention requiring mechanism to operate, to leverage the power of the phone. So here is a short proof of concept video. You could see I can control the phone, the music cap. I can change the track. I can increase the volume, and it is not just tagged to a music app. You can tie it to any other app or any other function of the mobile phone. It's just a UI to operate, but it's a more powerful way. So that's another example of leveraging what we can do in order to get harness harness much more powerful things from the available technology. A third example to justify why we do what we do is probably one of the natural behaviors that we all do, which is when we require information, oftentimes as kids, as adults, we point at things, ask, what is this, what is that? And especially for a person with visual impairment, it would have been very intuitive to be able to point at things that he or she wanted to find more information and get that. But most of the time, at the time of us developing this project, the most available technology was these powerful apps on phones. But that doesn't help much because it requires the user to go through very cumbersome steps of trying to unlock the phone, get to that app, and try to capture a good picture to get the information. And if you are blind, trying to point with the phone without having access to the viewfinder, it's an almost impossible task. And when you capture an image that is not framed well, then beyond that, it doesn't matter how good your vision algorithm is, you end up having no useful information. So we wanted to piggyback on this natural behavior, and we built something. Basically, you could think of as taking the phone out of the camera, putting onto your index finger. What that does is, now simply you can use your index finger as the cursor, point at anything, and the camera sees what you're pointing at. Then you can frame a good image. Basically, most of the time, what people do is they try to identify the boundaries of what they want to capture, and then hold, go back a bit, and press the button. And that became much easier way to capture a good image. And then with this, you could do a lot of powerful things. Here is a reading application we did.
History, yep, reading.
So imagine having to do that with a mobile camera, where you see all the books and all the text, and the system doesn't know what I'm interested in. But here, what you point is what you get read.
Next 10 years.
And I'm sure you can think of so many more applications on the same platform. We in fact ended up building a number of them: the text reading, notes recognition, product recognition, reading restaurant menus, so on and so forth. And continue to iterate, and our current ongoing prototype of this is actually we moved the camera and the processing to the headset, because if you can see here, there is a wireless headset and a processing unit on the wrist and the camera. It does what it's supposed to do, but then it's a very cumbersome design. It'll take, I think it'll take a fairly long time to think of this becoming that miniaturized to be a practical solution. So we looked at how can we make this more practical while keeping the interaction the same. So we took the camera and the processing out of the hand and embedded that into the headphones, and the headphone was taken out from the ear, because if you are blind, you need to access the surrounding sound, and made that into a bone conduction headphone. So something that's top of here, and integrated the camera and the processing. So it looked something like this, and still the interactions remain the same. You point at what you're interested in, the camera sees the entire scene and try to identify the fingertip, crops the region around that, and recognize the information for you. So this is one of the latest versions we have.
Okay, so if I pointed at something, like let's see if it can read this.
It's come a long way, but they believe they can make it even better.
Honey, squeeze me. Text found as poems in the waiting room.
Amazing. Poems in the waiting room, that's exactly what it is. So how important is technology like the finger reader for the blind?
Incredibly important. It's bringing technology innovations into the mainstream for them. We really thank them with our heart to say thank you for doing this, because what it's actually doing is making life one of choice for them.
This innovative technology that's now being worked on in New Zealand is not just helping people to see. A trial in Singapore is looking at helping children with dyslexia read. The team's also hoping it can be used as a translator.
My hope is it will really become a device that blind people use on a daily basis.
So Dan, you haven't tried the finger reader yet?
No, I haven't, but I'm quite intrigued to see what it's all about.
Yes.
For Daniel, seeing is believing.
Pop that on your head, and then what you do is you put this on your index finger.
Text found as seafood.
There is a magazine about seafood.
That's quite amazing. It sort of goes through and lists off all the sort of top headlines and stuff like that.
Coming to a cafe
So I
or
guess these three are examples to substantiate why we do what we do, which is there is opportunity to create intuitive interfaces that harness the full power of technology, and technology adapting and we bridge the gap between what the technology has to offer against our natural behavior. And we gave it a nice name. We call these type of interfaces assistive augmentations. They are not just assistive technology where the focus is on somebody with a disability. Here, the range is wider. You could think of applications of assistive augmentation towards substituting somebody with a specific need, as well as empowering a person to do things beyond what he or she could currently do. So it goes from substitution all the way to augmentation and empowering. Example of that would be the finger reader that I just showed a while ago. Doesn't need to be a tool for blind. It could also be used as a creativity tool for children to bring the beautiful things from nature and then use them as a digital paint on iPad, so that you allow a child to combine the beauty of nature and the power of digital devices. We in fact did a simple prototype of that. Yeah, so basically, when we think about assistive augmentation, we think about three key dimensions. The first one is the integration. That could be integrating with the body or integrating with the behavior. So the whole point is to make it seamless. The other dimension is the understanding. So rather than making everything the user has to do explicit interaction, we think of there should be a balance between implicit interactions and explicit interactions, but it should be by understanding the user's intentions, behaviors, and psychology. The main goal there is to still maintain the agency, still make the user feel that the user is in control and the user is doing what he or she is supposed to do, and technology interfering at the right time with the right level of distraction. That's the understanding aspect. The third aspect is the translational aspect. So it is always either focusing on strengthening, that's more towards the assistive side, or extending abilities. An ideal assistive augmentation is sort of an intersection of these three key considerations. What I'm going to do now is run through a number of projects that we have ongoing in the lab. And they are situated in this space at various spaces, but you can start looking at them and appreciating sort of how they connect to this way of thinking of assistive augmentations. So the first project I'm going to talk about is Gym Soles, which is a smart insole. And what it does is it can recognize, it can sense the center of pressure. It has pressure sensitive layer, and then it also has vibrotactile motors that can provide vibrotactile feedback. So with this, a user can simply put that into a shoe. And one of the use cases would be when you are exercising, the system understands where your center of pressure is and provides feedback. So it's not getting in the way of the user. It's just, and then it is not taking the attention away from user. And while doing studies with having motion tracking system with and without, and comparing with and without this feedback, we found that people who does exercises such as deadlifting, squats, manage to maintain a better posture when they had this haptic feedback compared to when they had no feedback. And that sort of fulfills all three dimensions of that assistive augmentation idea that I mentioned. Here is a short video of how that works.
We present GymSouls Plus, an extended reality approach to improve the body posture when performing squats and deadlifts. We develop a flexible wearable insole with 8 vibrotactile motors that provides haptic feedback on the center pressure of the body. Additionally, we developed a visual feedback system by using Google Glasses. It has shown that translating hidden information on the center of pressure back into reality can assist users in maintaining a correct body posture when performing squats and deadlifts.
That's the first example. And another example is Chew It, which is basically a smart chewing gum. And we all know our mouth is, apart from our hands, our mouth has very high control. We have a high dexterity in the mouth to control things, and chewing things and chewing things while doing stuff is a very natural behavior. So we wanted to piggyback on that and develop this smart chewing gum. Just 1 second, please. Girls. Sorry, my girls just came home. So the whole idea is we wanted to come up with an interface that is unobstructed, hands-free, and ears-free. So we ran a number of studies to understand the right shape, because if you had something very symmetric, once you put it inside the mouth, you have no idea the orientation, right? So we had to have that asymmetric shape, and we had to consider the right size. If it is too big, that's going to be a very uncomfortable interface. If it is too small, there's a risk of you swallowing it and perhaps choking. And there is a nice middle ground where it fulfills both these considerations. And then we had to consider the isolation of the electronics in the event that if somebody swallow this, how do you prevent, people getting contaminated? So with all these considerations, we built this chewing gum. And as you can see, I'll show you in a bit in a video, it was impossible for outsider to recognize if someone is having this interface. And it's a semi-implantable device, I would say, because you can just put it in the mouth when you want it and use it, and then take it out, peel off the skin, keep it in your pocket, and if you need it, put it back again in the mouth. This is how it worked.
By using hands-free input operations, you will be able to shuffle through your playlist while riding.
The club isn't. He said, let's get out of this town, drive out of the city.
Also, it can help you during your office work or presenting your projects to an audience. Chew It aims to unveil novel users' interactions, allowing more intuitive hands-free operations.
Third example is smart finger. So the idea here is the sense of touching stuff to interact is quite intuitive. Like we have so used to touch screens and dedicated touch interfaces. But the problem is most of the objects that we interact, be it our regular cup or regular table, the passive devices, unless we instrument them with dedicated touch capability, we can't use that very natural way of interaction, the touch-based interaction. So we came up with a very simple sensor, just a single IMU mounted on the finger, and with our machine learning algorithms, we were able to detect very accurately whether a person is holding the finger in air or actually touching something. That was very precise. And not only that, we were able to then even compute the path on a plane and do tracking, as well as track the gestures, whether the finger goes this way, that way, and if you pull something that has a big curvature versus a small curvature, opening a bottle versus opening a door, we could differentiate. And that allows, just with a simple nail mounted single IMU, you could pretty much unlock the regular touch based interactions on any object without having to instrument objects. So here is how it works. This is about providing effective touch without having to put electronics on the body. Because oftentimes you need to wear wristbands or certain wearables that has the electronics embedded and the motors embedded that gives you that vibrotactile feedback. We were wondering, is there a better way of doing that? And one of the approaches is you can just move the skin of the hair. That creates this very subtle effective touch. The question was, how can we do that without having to put electronics on the body? And one way is to use the magnetic based approach. And what we did was, you could buy off the shelf cosmetics that has the iron particles in it, and you can augment your skin hair with those iron particles. And then with the external magnetic field, you can move the hair. And when you move that hair, you feel that very effective sense of touch. For this current version, we actually built our own mechanism that has the magnetic mechanism, but the concept extend to using magnets completely built into the environment. So you don't need to have a wearable to actuate this, but in this particular form, we had the magnetic mechanism in the wearable form. Here is the concept. You can see these are magnified hair skins, and on top there's a magnet, and as the magnet moves, the hair moves. And you don't have to have a physical magnet. You can do this with electromagnetic fields. facial cosmetics. All you do is you augment your skin here with that, and once you do that, you could be getting this touch sensation. Could be using a wearable, or could be using external magnetic fields. So this has many applications, including one of the things we tried with VR is having this feedback and getting people to watch different scenes and reported their sense of immersion. And with this people reported being more immersed. So another project more leaning towards understanding the user. Here we built a memory augmentation wearable. The idea is if you try to prompt for memory training or support when the user is not ready, that's going to be a painful thing rather than a help. So here what this device does is it monitors the physiological response, the heart rate, skin conductivity, and based on that we estimate the cognitive load, and then we find these opportunistic times where the user might be more willing to try a memory training, or and then prompt user to try the memory training at that point. And we found that indeed prompting at times when the user has more bandwidth, has more likely for the user to accept and use it than random prompting. Here is how it works.
Prospective memory lapses, which involves forgetting to perform intended actions, such as leaving items behind, and forgetting to take medication, affects independent living in older adults. Memory training using smartphone applications could address this. However, users are sometimes unaware of available times for training or forget about it, presenting a need for proactive prompts. Existing applications provide time-based prompts. But a well-timed prompt may not be effective if the user is not cognitively available to engage in it. Thus, from a focus group, interviews, and usability testing, we conceptualized and developed Prompto, a conversational memory coach that uses physiological signals to suggest training sessions during relaxed or idle moments. Prompto guides the application of an effective memory technique called the when-then technique through a dialogue-based interface. With 21 older adults, we evaluated users' receptivity to prompts for starting memory practice during low and high cognitive load states. We found that users were more receptive under low cognitive load. We provide further design implications from a 7-day in the wild deployment with 7 users. We hope that our work could inspire more research into designing conversational agents which can consider users' physiological states, as well as relate to and understand us better. Please refer to our paper for more details.
Okay, so the last example I have is Muswitch. Here, the idea was to create simple plug and play device that provides access to audio through vibration, so that it becomes an interface for deaf people to access audio, and this particular device was targeted at music. The sensor that you see on the left side, that can pick sound from either ambient sound, or from a digital input, or from a surface, and then it does the Fourier transform analysis and then get the frequency components and pass it on to the display, which has lights and vibrotactile motors that are very fast responsive, and they can switch. They have a rise time around 17 milliseconds. So from the time that the sensor gets the sound to get the vibrotactile feedback, it's a very short delay. So it's also useful for things like music, which has a very time sensitive aspect. With this, we ran number of studies. Here some basic thing where we try to get people to recognize the number of beats. And these are kids profoundly deaf, so they have never heard sound before. You can see the guy on the right side, his task was to count the number of beats without looking at the drum. That's a basic task. Here we tried getting more and more complex tasks. Here the idea was to increase the loudness and see if a user can pick that up, the change of the vibration intensity. So if you focus on the face of the guy on the right below the Musbits label, as the loudness goes up, you can see see how the expression changes. And then after trying these basic skills, we let people have a free play. And what I'm going to show is something that a 14-year-old boy who has never heard sound in life, after a couple of hours of training with Musbits, he's able to play on his own. It's a very simple beat, but the point is, with a short amount of training, understanding the basic things, the person was able to not just open loop play, but it was a play with a feedback. So he was adjusting his actions based on what he received through his wrist. And we actually gave another modified version of this to a deaf lady in Hamilton. That was last year, March. And since then, as we speak, she's using it on regular basis, and she's sending the notes like what I'm showing you on the right side of the screen. Time to time she sends them, and here you can see she has discovered use cases that we didn't think of. Her most used use case is using this in the car while driving, turning the music on. Looks like it has given her so much pleasure, and the note says it all. Yeah, so these are several examples that shows the whole space of this assistive augmentation. And there are a number of more projects going on, but I just picked a few just to show the variety, and some of them are touching all 3 dimensions, some of them are only touching one. But the message here is really the mismatch between the technology, what the technology has to offer, the power of technology, and what we can do. And there's a danger if we don't really think about this in a serious way, because collection of smart devices is not necessarily going to make us smarter. So we need to think of how can we use the power of all these smart devices in a way that it enhances the quality of life of the user. And the way to do that would be to think of the assistive augmentation way, where the focus is on adapting the technology with minimal adaptation to what we usually behave. Yeah, so the message here is think of this when you do your own work. How can we harness the full power and design intuitive ways of accessing the technology so that we feel empowered? And it could be substituting a skill, or it could be augmenting and providing a new skill. Yeah, and what I presented is a collection of work from my group, and these are the PhD students, master students, and research fellows who are really the backbone of most of this work. Thank you so much, and I'm happy to take questions.